So I'm sure you guys remember all the chaos and mayhem that was going down when we had pro-Palestine protesters on college campuses, and the media basically made a giant mountain out of a molehill. You had these peaceful protesters who were doing these encampments. They were just classic old school hippie stuff, holding hands and singing Kumbaya, dancing, like supporting the people of Palestine, calling for an end to the genocide, calling for the universities to divest from Israel. You had all of that going on. And everybody was pretending like the Third Reich returned. And you had these students being smeared as anti-Semites and Hamas supporters and terrorists, and they sent the cops in many instances to crack skulls and arrest people, and even faculty members who were on the side of the students got arrested. It was horrible, horrible. Now, in retrospect, what many people have come to acknowledge and admit is that the instances of violence in these protests, it was from Zionist counter-protesters. It wasn't from the pro-Palestine students. UCLA is the best example of that. There was a lot of violence, and we showed you guys the videos, I should say, the other week. Well, Ilhan Omar is absolutely going to grill the chancellor of UCLA. His name is Chancellor Block. And she's just going to dog walk his ass and really expose him. Let's watch.
Thank you all for being here. Chancellor Block, just for clarification, the video that we just watched, we saw people moving around. Was it possible, do you think, for that student to be able to get into campus? Was that student actually being blocked from entering campus?
Well, that was in the middle of, excuse me, that was in the middle of campus. So no, not being blocked from being on campus, maybe being blocked from a pathway on campus, which he shouldn't be allowed to, he should be allowed to pass. I mean, any part of campus is open to students, so blocking him was really inappropriate.
I appreciate that. The recent images from UCLA are appalling. What is more appalling is that it was completely preventable. You could have prevented this by protecting the diverse groups of pro-Palestinian students that were peacefully gathered on campus to share meals, stand in solidarity against a brutal genocide. You could have prevented this by protecting these students' First Amendment right to assemble. You could have prevented this when you learned about rats being released into the encampment. You could have prevented this.
I didn't know that happened. There were rats released into the encampment by the Zionists. Oh.
When there was an anonymous group funded and constructed, again, a giant video with loudspeakers to play vile and disturbing footage. You could have prevented this when you saw an angry mob on campus on the night of April 30th, but you did not. Instead, you, the UCLA leadership and law enforcement, stood by for hours as the mob of agitators gathered near the encampment with a clear intention to cause violence. And because of your inaction, they acted on the intention and brutally attacked students you were responsible for. This happened in front of your eyes, on your campus, and it was live streamed for the whole world to see. So I would like to know if you are truly committed to keeping your students safe, how did you fail these students at many critical points where you could have intervened?
Thank you for the question, but I'm sorry, but I reject the premise. These students.
How do you reject the premise? Are these pictures lying? Are any of these people in jail?
Can I finish my statement?
No, are any of these people in jail? Are any of these people arrested?
LAPD is working on trying to identify the people who were assailants that evening. We were committed to finding out the people that were involved.
It's been over a month. I submit for the record an article that the CNN has produced.
Without objection.
Why did you not immediately send the police that were standing by, your campus police, law enforcement, to intervene?
We tried. We notified, as soon as we saw the violence, we notified all of our mutual aid partners. We tried to get police there as quickly as possible. But going back to my original point, so this encampment was against policy. This violated time, place.
Oh my God. So Ilhan Omar is saying, hey, there is literal video of violence being done by the Zionist counter-protesters. One of them was beating up a pro-Palestinian protester with a pipe. They were shooting fireworks into the encampment. They were tearing down the encampment and assaulting pro-Palestinian students. Ilhan is saying there was actual violence done. What does he do? Swats that aside and he goes, but the encampments were actually against school policy. I don't give a fuck if it was against school policy. It shouldn't have been against school policy because it's a totally peaceful, non-violent protest calling to end a genocide and divest. I don't care. It's against our wrong and stupid policy. Good. Good. You're going to focus on that over the fucking violence? Oh my God.
If I may, the footage from that night reveals that some of the most dramatic attacks were carried out by individuals not affiliated with UCLA, not the university students, faculty that were arrested. Why have the violent agitators, who you know have been identified, not been held accountable for assaulting over 150 of your students? You should be ashamed in the fact that you failed your students. You should be ashamed for letting a peaceful protest gathering get hijacked by an angry mob. You should be ashamed for allowing such violence to take place on your campus, which will now be weaponized by Republicans in this committee. You played right into the hands in laying the ground for attacking institutions of public education, stripping students of their rights, and broader repression of movements. I know that my time is up. I would like to submit these images into the record.
Without objection.
And an open letter to the UCLA community from the UCLA Jewish faculty and staff.
In other words, bitch, do not come and talk to me, number one, about law and order, and number two, about free speech. You don't believe in law and order, you let the criminals go. You let the actual criminals doing the violence go. And you don't believe in free speech, because even in your answer right now, you were saying, the encampments were against school policy and we need to take them down. So you're doubly wrong. You're against free speech, and you're against law and order. Ilhan here is standing up for the law and order perspective and the free speech perspective. By the way, she references a CNN article there. Even CNN had to admit, and we covered this on the show, even they had to admit, they did a phenomenal report where they actually got into the specifics and the details and who was doing the violence, and they tracked down the names of some of the Zionist counter-protesters who did the violence, and they caught them red-handed on video, and they tried to go interview them, and then they interviewed one of their mothers or whatever. And thankfully, I can report to you today that one of the violent Zionist protesters have been arrested. It was a guy who was wearing like a white hoodie, and he was covering his face, and they were able to identify him, and he was one of the guys who was beating up a pro-Palestine protesters with a pipe. That one, I'm happy to admit, has been arrested and will probably face assault charges. And at least on one issue, there's been justice. And again, by the way, let's be clear. It is literally only because one reporter at CNN decided I'm going to do the right thing and I'm going to actually give the facts on this. One reporter. You know how terrible CNN has been about the genocide in Gaza and a whole bunch of different things. But every now and then, something slips through the cracks. Christiane Amanpour has done some good work. This one reporter did some phenomenal work. And one of them has been arrested. So a little crumb of justice in a sea of injustice. So in other words, Ilhan is 1,000,000% correct. And this fucking pathetic chancellor should resign in shame and disgrace for failing pathetically at his job. You guys want to know what the sad reality of it is? This is the sad reality. A lot of these universities, they take money from wealthy Zionists. They fund these schools and universities. So they feel reliant on them, and they try to represent their perspective. What's their perspective? The pro-Palestine students are pro-Hamas, and they're anti-Semites, and they're terrible, and you need to crack down on them. And the Zionists, counter-protesters who are doing the violence, are actually angels, and their violence is not violence. This is why many of them have handled this in exactly the wrong way. By the way, same thing for Joe Biden. Joe Biden is ideologically a Zionist, and he also takes a tremendous amount of money from AIPAC. And so, wow, would you look at that? When he came out and gave his speech, he was saying the pro-Palestine protesters were the ones who were breaking the law and the ones who weren't, this isn't free speech, right? This is what he said. Absolutely pathetic. Great job here from Ilhan Omar. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.